Hey guys, this is John. Welcome to another standard video. Okay, I have the white pieces. I'm playing Jesse HF. This player looks familiar. I have played him or her one time before. Let's play D4. I believe I played D4 in my last video as well. Black plays knight F6. I played C4 last time, so let's play knight F3. Sometimes I like to do this just to have a little bit more control over the position. It prevents E5 pretty conclusively, so you don't have to worry about, you know, uh, Budapest Gambit, things like that. Okay, so we have a Queen's Gambit decline position by transposition. I usually play either Knight C3 or captures on D5. Also Bishop G5 I play a lot of. Those positions all kind of merge together. Let's go for a Catalan. Let's fianchetto the light square bishop. This is something I very rarely do. I have a general familiarity with this type of position. There is quite a bit of theory here. So black takes the pawn, which is critical. I'm going to go queen a4. So taking the pawn makes a lot of sense, given that white's bishop is no longer directed towards the c4 square. So let's regain the pawn. Black's going to go b5 more than likely. Yeah, gain a tempo. Yeah, and this just has a lot of theory. Bishop b7. I believe bishop d2 is the move now. But I'm also trying to anticipate if black goes down some of these main roads, where I'm going to play bishop d2 pretty quickly, but anticipate where black may be looking to deploy some theoretical wrinkle, some nuance that I personally am not familiar with. Maybe that's a fool's errand to try to predict that. Probably is, because there are many branches here, but I'm on the lookout, you know? I don't play this line so much from the white side, so not to be too negative, but I do think you have to be somewhat paranoid in chess if you want to become a good player. And I'm thinking of ways, if I were in black shoes, that I might try to surprise me. But okay, for now, good sign that black is thinking a little bit. So why bishop d2? I mean, this move looks kind of stubby, kind of awkward. Usually you wouldn't put a bishop just on the d2 square in a position like this. That's often a beginner type of move because it clogs up the center. But the idea is it helps control these b4 and a5 squares, and sometimes it's useful in playing pawn b4 specifically. So black plays knight c6, attacking the pawn. I know the main line used to be bishop e4 instead, looking to attack this queen. So I think here I should play e3 to defend the pawn. I don't rightly remember if there's really any other move to play. Maybe knight takes d4 isn't technically a threat, because after this sequence of moves, I do have knight takes e6. Like, that vaguely comes to mind. So I could consider something like rook c1. But I don't know. E3 stands out to me. I'm also remembering a Kramnik versus Carlsen game that I've often used as a training exercise for students in, I think, this exact line, what black is doing here with knight b4, because I think I should take now. And then the battle is going to revolve around whether black can get c5 in, whether they can achieve pawn to c5. So let's take. Black has the bishop pair, but if I can prevent black from playing c5, I will be very happy with this. But I don't want to be in a hurry to, let's say, clamp the position with a3, b4, because black has this a5 idea. So let's just go ahead and play knight bd2. From here, my knight could pivot to b3. I can smoothly bring a rook to c1 if I want. Either one of the rooks, really. Okay, rook c8. Yeah, now I think this is extremely similar, if not identical, to that Kramnik versus Carlsen game that I was mentioning, which is a game early in Magnus's career. I think he wasn't quite 2,700. I'm going to link this game in the comments, by the way. But it was a masterclass by Kramnik. He won very quickly, and it was just a short strategic masterclass, controlling the a5, c5, and even c6 squares. Okay, so a3 certainly makes sense. And then let's say black backs off the bishop. Let's say bishop e7 or bishop d6, b4. There's still a5, but what I'm sort of recalling about that Kramnik Carlsen game is that Kramnik actually ignored the pressure on b4. But I'm also in this situation where I want to play the position in front of me, right? I don't want to see ghosts and try to play something that isn't really there. So knight b3 also comes to mind. But I'm just looking vaguely at a3. I'm not really worried about a trade. I think if a trade happens, but maybe at the very end, c5 would work because black has queen d5. Okay, so a3 is maybe not the move. Maybe I should play knight b3. Maybe I should go ahead and do that. But there are situations where black can play c5 anyways. So maybe this is all just fine for black. Maybe this is in fact just normal stuff. I actually think it is. But let's play knight b3. I don't want to think too much longer on this. I've already spent several minutes that I'm not going to get back. Yeah, now I'm recalling that black can go for c5 in some of these positions where it looks like the square is covered. And I think that's in fact the critical move here. Or yeah, maybe this first. We'll find out. So bishop e4. We play queen e2, but then c5. Is there anything with a3? Probably c4 at that point. Let me get some sort of trade. I can take a6. There's rook c2 at the end, though. Not sure I'm really digging that. So I think queen c1 is the principled thing to do. But queen d5 is coming as well. Queen d5 is in the mix. So queen e2, c5, a3, c4. We get the capture, and then the capture on b3. Is that position playable? Looks interesting. Let's go for it. Queen e2. Maybe black will ultimately just play queen d5 here. Line up the queen and the bishop. Yeah, it's hard. You know, I had this model game in my head, but it's hard to tear yourself away from that or tear yourself away from opening knowledge that you might have about one particular position or line and put yourself in the moment. I think players with the style similar to me especially struggle with that. I'm kind of like a, theoretical type player. I like to know what's going on if I'm playing something in the current state of theory, fashion, whatever. And that can create problems on a practical basis. Yeah, queen d5. Probably going to put a rook on c1 here. Let's just play this rook over. f3's covered. I'm not worried about that. So I do think the critical thing is going to be for black to go ahead and play c5 and basically challenge me to prove some sort of advantage after all the trades. And I don't think I really have an advantage. Just going to say it right now. I don't think that's going to lead to anything. But we should never be above just playing an equal position in chess. Not a drawish position, or worse, a totally drawn position, an equal position. Okay, black plays to a5, which I'm actually kind of happy to see because I think c5 was critical there. So knight c5 just instantly comes to mind here. Hit the bishop. I would absolutely love if we get a trade on c5, although I don't think that's going to happen. So unless I'm missing something, which I don't think I am, I'm going to go ahead and play this. I think black's in tough shape all of a sudden because this is exactly the move black does not want to allow in this structure, preventing black from achieving c5, hitting the light square bishop. a3 could be on the way. The pawn on b5 is now kind of loose. I'm not threatening to take it yet because black would take on f3. But yeah, I think that was a hasty and somewhat knee-jerk decision by black strategically. Maybe they got overambitious there. And here you can see why playing rook fc1 was kind of nice. I mean, I wasn't planning for it to go down this way, but in keeping the other rook on a1, I'm guarding against queen takes a2. Really, really nice. Okay, black takes, but let's take with the rook. Absolutely. And this pawn is looking lost. Okay, so again, I can't take with the queen because of bishop takes, but can I just take with the rook? Is there any penalty to doing that? Queen a6, maybe? Is that the possible reply? But I have stuff like bishop f1, perhaps? This is certainly critical. I think doubling would also make a lot of sense. That gives black a chance to play c6 maybe and start digging in. So rook takes b5. I'm trying to refute rook takes b5 right now. Otherwise, I'm going to play it. I think I see a couple different solutions if black plays queen a6. So yeah, let's take it. That's a very important pawn. Going up a point, breaking up black's queen side. Black doesn't even challenge with queen a6. Just offers a trade. I'm probably going to take black up on that and then play rook c1. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, black gets to activate, but let's go after this pawn on c7, activate ourselves. This is a 10+2 game, by the way. So I've got a bit of a time reserve, but I don't want to get too complacent. Okay, black attacks the b pawn. b3 looks really natural here. The only thing is it gives black a hook for a4, but I don't think I can worry too much about that nuance. I'm up a pawn. Let's just keep this pretty straightforward. Yeah, black's gonna start throwing stuff at me. Okay, rook c5. I think also breaking up this battery would be really nice if I could. So even a move like knight e1. Could play h3 or h4 here. Both those make a lot of sense. Maybe h3 in particular. H4 just allows knight g4 under some circumstances. I think maybe I can avoid making that concession. So let's play h3. Yeah, rook c5 might have been good too. I'm just not sure about this a4 move if black tries to sack and then invade or something. Yeah, I mean, this move might be unnecessary. h4 wasn't exactly a threat. I think I was under the assumption that it might be a threat, but I can just take it with the knight. But a move like this is almost always going to be useful. Just give my king an extra escape route. Oh, by the way, while I have a very brief down moment, I got an awesome book today. It's a book published in 1976. It's called Psychology in Chess by Grandmaster Nikolai Krogius, Soviet GM. Awesome, awesome book if you like kind of metagame aspects of chess. So he talks about time trouble and how to address time trouble. He talks about style in chess, the role of emotions. The book is out of print, but if that sounds interesting, see if you can get a copy of that book. Really, really good. Okay, knight d5. Yeah, I think I'm starting to want to just break up that battery. Like knight e1 looks really tempting here because it also hits this pawn. I think I'm going to go for it. Hit the pawn on h5. Remove the capture. I think black's going to waste a tempo here or invest a tempo in preventing queen takes h5. I'd be kind of surprised if they didn't. But then maybe I get a chance to play rook c4, make it harder for black to get into a4. And it looks like things are stabilizing a bit. I could also play queen c4. Probably also plenty good. Queen c4 even better. That might tie them down further. I somehow like leading with the rook, but it's also I don't actually see why I wouldn't prefer this move. Let's do it. And it might threaten e4 as well. Drive the knight away and then take on c7. All right, so I'm operating with my fianchettoed knight here, guys, on g2. Up a pawn. What's my strategy? Look for smart trades. Black's offering one right now. I don't know if I'll take them up on it. But yeah, mainly try to simplify and press my advantage home in the endgame. Okay, so e4 again comes to mind. I think knight f6 is a probable response to that. But that might be worth it for me to get the queens off the board. Like, then trade on b4 and play f3, something like that. I think I actually like the look of that. Time is getting low. If I trade first and then play e4, it gives black a chance for knight c3. So I think I'm going to go e4 directly. Yeah, let's play it. Black takes, I'll take with the rook. 100%. So I think knight f6 would be the most pesky move here. Counterattacking my e-pawn. I could play queen takes c7, but knight takes e4. I'm sure that's still better for me, but I'm probably going to prefer the clarity of trading queens and then f3. Okay, black actually takes. I'm surprised by that. That just seems to improve my rook, but maybe they want to play knight b4? They do. Okay, knight b4. All right, so a3. A3, they have to play knight a6. And then I even have rook c6 if I want. Yeah, I can force a knight endgame just purely up a pawn. Is there something better? I mean, a4 might be kind of similar, but I don't like leaving that knight entrenched. What about a3, knight d3? I'm not worried about knight a2 because rook c2. So a3, knight d3, rook c3. Yeah, that can't possibly be good for them. Okay, I'm going to go for this option. There's also rook a4 here. Looks interesting. Try to get the outside pass pawn. Might be even better. Rook a4 takes c5. I'm going to go for this one. Okay. Calling a bit of an audible, which is dangerous because I'm down 4 minutes. But I trust myself with this 2-second increment. And I think the position is simple enough where I can do this. Okay, let's go rook a7. I want to activate my knight pretty soon, though. Ooh, I don't know if I should have done that because I just allowed knight d4. Yeah. Yeah, that was a mistake. All right, check. Play d5 next. The a pawn's still dangerous, and I'm going to try to get my knight to e3. Yeah, I don't like that I allowed this whole sequence. Let's go here. Let's firm this up for a moment. The a4 next, I think. Guard these pawns. c6. Okay, they're going to force things. All right, well. Sure. Let's do it. I'm going to push. I mean, there's maybe some question whether they could play h4 around here, but I'm just going to trust that I should push my a pawn. Let's play this. Okay, what next? Rook a8 and start moving the pawn up. But I want to be able to come to the rescue of the pawn too. This is tricky. I'm obviously playing for the win on the board. But how strong is the a pawn actually? Hmm? Probably going to bounce back and forth now. No. Knight b3. Okay. I feel like they're making a couple mistakes, but I don't have much time to think about it. Let's see if I can go knight d6 somehow. I don't know. Let's go here. Can they take? I don't know. Take on f2 with the knight? Maybe. Ah, but then knight rook d2. Whoa. They're doing this? No, no, no. That's not a good decision. I'm very happy to get those knights off the boards, guys. Now I think this is pretty straightforward. Actually, a pretty textbook win. Yeah, my king's even going to get over really quick. I got to go rook c7 or rook c8. And my king is going to invade ASAP. Yeah, we get the angle on him. Get the jump here. Let's even cut them off just to be safe. Wow. Yeah, I'm shocked Black did that, trading knights. I would have thought knight takes f2. But okay, let's not completely relax yet. We got to do a little work still. I mean, I don't know if preventing... I think Black's only chance was f6, g5 there, by the way. I don't know if preventing king g4 was even necessary, but... yeah, now this should be a easy win. Black's way too slow here. That happened fast. Thanks for the game. To my opponent. Yeah, so let's just refrain from looking at any analysis for a second. Obviously, I did my usual pontificate in the opening a little too much. Yeah, I regret rook a7. I think rook a7 was inaccurate. It just invited knight c6. I thought this move was establishing some control by being annoying. I'm actually threatening rook takes c7 here because then rook takes a3, rook c8. But it didn't occur to me that Black could just do this. And if rook takes c7, knight takes d4, which is probably even an improved version of the game. Because Black's got quite a bit of activity then. So I tried this and tried to get my knight in the mix, but now I feel like Black's probably close to drawing. And in fact, I think I saw a moment. Yeah, where was it? Here? Yeah, so if Black had played knight c5 at this moment, hit the rook. Maybe I can go rook a8. I was thinking this, but I guess I have a7 at the end, and it's not so clear because their knight isn't attacking the pawn yet. But if they maneuver to do that, or maneuver to attack my rook, I actually don't think I'm in time because this pin is annoying. I can't play knight c4. That probably draws. I don't know, though. The moment they play knight b6, I have rook b8 hitting the rook. Okay, so it's a little bit tricky even there. But yeah, clearly Black's mistake was trading knights. No doubt about that. I played rook d7, hitting their knight. If rook takes f2, I can go king e3, and I think I win a piece. Maybe there's knight c5, but I think that's probably bad. I don't really trust that. Maybe even knight c5, I could just trade and push. I think that wins. I think they can't stop the pawn. But I think on rook d7, it would have been critical to try knight takes f2. Even up the material by taking on f2 with the knight. Ah, okay. Maybe I'm still pushing here because I saw a couple things. I saw rook d2, which forces a rook trade. Oh, even that. There's maybe this move. Kind of similar to the game. I guess I can go here. Man, knights are just tricky. Like, I'm instantly analyzing, and all these calculations are tricky to make because there's a pair of knights on the board. Such an unpredictable piece. Well, I don't know. Maybe knight takes f2 isn't so great because another thing that I'm seeing now is a6, which I don't think I would have seen with the 15 or so seconds that I had. But a6, because if rook takes a6, I take the knight. And if Black moves the knight, let's say knight g4 to safety, then I get an a7. Defended by the rook. Knight b6 is a threat, followed by promotion. I'm still preventing knight e5, fortunately. I mean, this might be winning. Well, check. I mean, it's almost a mating net if black had f5 in somehow, controlling the square. Fortunately, this isn't winning for black, as I can promote, along with just taking the rook. Okay, so this is interesting. I'll definitely be curious to take a look at this moment in the game, or in the analysis. There's also, let's say, knight c5, just retreating and attacking the rook, or knight b4, maybe trying to get in knight c6. Basically, in all these lines, black is either trying to counterattack and win a pawn back, or in a best case scenario, fork me somehow, or win the a pawn if they can. They would love to win the a pawn. But yeah, once they allowed this trade and I can get the rook behind the pawn, remember, classic principle in the endgame, rooks love to be behind pawns. This is a point of advice for the offensive side in particular. If you can place your rook behind your pawn, spurring it on, making sure that it's protected when it advances, that's a powerful mechanism, because black's rook has to go passive here to stop this. Black would much rather be able to play their rook behind my pawn and force me to defend the pawn from the side or in front of the pawn, which is going to hinder the pawn's advance. But once we do this, this is a well-known situation in theoretical endgames where one side has an extra rook pawn and there's a few other pawns on the other side of the board. This is usually a win. And in fact, there was a Alekhine versus Capablanca World Championship game where I think Alekhine won, and it was exactly this type of endgame. The only difference is the defending side's king, Capablanca's king, was a little bit closer even, and both sides were able to march their kings over in tandem. But at that point, you can start attacking the pawns on the other side of the board. And here, I think that wasn't even necessary because I had the angle on black. You see? So I'm coming right for the b7 square. So we'll check this endgame. I'm also very curious about the opening. We'll see if that Kramnik versus Carlsen game that I referenced is in here. I think I either misplayed it with e3 slightly, or maybe black just improved on Magnus's game. If I were to single out one moment that I was very surprised black played in a certain way, it wasn't even the trade of the knights. It was a5. Very surprised by that move because black played rook c8. They probably know that the c5 square is super important, so I'm pretty shocked they didn't play c5 right at this moment. I don't see an issue with it. Maybe they were a little worried about their coordination with the queen needing to help defend the bishop, but there's no way for me to exploit that. Like, especially given that I played rook f to c1 instead of rook a to c1, because if I play the rook back to d1, not only could they retreat down this diagonal and keep the rook defending the bishop, but they could even play queen h5, even in the case that I had my rooks on c1 and d1. I think that would be fine. So yeah, I was surprised by the trade of knights later, but also, it seemed like black was playing off my time, but I was really surprised by this a5 move. I think that was a clear mistake, and I think c5 is probably going to be equal. Okay, so the computer analysis has been run already. Looks like, yeah, we spent the majority of the game in my favor. However, after queen e2, was this the moment where c5 was good? Yes, it was. Yeah, c5 right here is playable, and that's even before the queen went to c5, or went to d5. But what about now? Okay, yeah, it's still like c5. It doesn't say it's the only move, interestingly, but it still likes it for sure, because this is a backwards pawn. This pawn doesn't fit well with black's queenside structure otherwise. The pawn's on a6 and b5. Black really needs to try to get this pawn advanced. Also, the rook behind it, that's not a good piece long term if it's just going to be staring at that pawn. So you need to think about advancing that if you're playing black here. Yeah, I talked about bishop d2. I won't go into the whole philosophy of the Catalan, but suffice it to say, this is a much more strategic line and nuanced line than even other lines of the Queen's Gambit declined. If you watch my King's Indian climbing the rating ladder video from the other day, I talked about how I usually don't recommend the King's Indian for black unless they're at least 1800. I feel very similarly about the Catalan for white, which involves fee and ketoing this light square bishop. This is a nuanced opening. And even me trying to play this from time to time, like I feel like I understand very little of what's going on in this opening. Because sometimes white is purely gambiting this pawn. Sometimes you can win it back. Yeah, there's a lot of long-term pressure and compensation on this diagonal. But I think this is not the type of opening you want to get into in general if you're playing with ideas rather than concrete theory in mind, if that makes sense. There's just too much theory. And a player who really knows what they're doing as black can hurt you. So yeah, fortunately, we got a line out of this that I know a little bit about. This whole take on c4 and then queen a4. White also plays queen c2. That can transpose, although I think queen c2 does give black the extra option of playing b5. Even though this looks dangerous, this is playable for black. So just to show you what I mean in the database, this is the master's database in the position after bishop d2. So yeah, bishop e4 is the main line move. Lots of draws in the master's database here. Rook a7, very weird looking move. I've actually played this move myself. The idea is to free up the a8 square. After you move the knight, you can sometimes play queen a8 and set up that battery, which black kind of set up later in the game. Also just dodges any issues here. I think sometimes the rook can swing along the 7th rank, especially after black plays c5. So that's a line. Yeah, black plays knight c6. Okay, so this is the Kramnik Carlsen game I was mentioning. So Kramnik was probably, at close to his height at this point. I can't remember if he was world champion at this time, but he might have been. And yeah, Magnus was an up and coming player. Very, very strong, nearly 2,700, but up and coming nonetheless. I don't know why Elite Chess isn't loading that. Okay, there we go. So how did this game go? E3, that's what I played. Knight b4, take. Ah, Kramnik played a3 first. He played a3 first. Okay. And then knight bd2. You know what? That makes a lot of sense because here c5 isn't working. Because on takes, without the inclusion of a3, bishop e7, black would have the bishop here, right? Black could play bishop takes d2, I think. Is that right? No, that's not right either. But I think the gist of it, and I'll maybe go back and look at specifics if you guys are really curious, I can do that in the comments. But I bet the gist of it is that bishop takes d2 is just a useful move to prevent in a lot of these lines. So if there's not like a one-to-one correlation, mapping my game that I just played versus this, that's like the generality I would speak to, is that black having bishop takes d2 and deflecting the queen or the knight is pretty useful, I think. Also for white, probably just being able to play b4 is really useful after a3. I mean, I even mentioned that in the game. And here's how the game went. So rook c8, trying to play c5. Kramnik plays b4 right on time. a5, the undermining move. Knight e5, ignoring the pressure on b4. They don't trade bishops. If a trade happens and then black takes here, white can land this knight on c6. This is a big idea behind the knight e5 move and why white can ignore that pressure on b4 in this way. So yeah, queen looks like there's some games with queen d7 and now a takes b4. And at the end of the day, white succeeds in preventing black from playing c5. And probably keeps a small advantage. There's a couple games where black actually didn't do poorly at all. One win and one draw. But this is what white is angling for. Magnus played knight d5 instead of bishop takes g2, and then Kramnik hit him with this move. Knight b3. A takes b4, knight a5. Hit the bishop with tempo. Bishop to a8. And then one of the knights came into c6. They traded. And then through a series of trades, Kramnik got that scenario we were just looking at, but even in an improved form. Evens up the material with this capture at the end. Black's pawn remains on c7, this backward pawn. The knight is beautiful on c6, forever preventing that pawn from reaching even the c6 square. This pawn on b5 stands out. The pawn on d5 stands out. Black's in a straitjacket here. You can see the eval. And Kramnik won in pretty short order. Picked up a pawn. Magnus briefly gets one of the pawns back, but he immediately ran into rook b1 with a pin. Queen d6, queen a4, and black already resigned, facing threats like this. White structure, just perfect. All pawns on dark squares. Opposite black's dark square bishop, or on the same color as black's dark square bishop. So maybe I'll do a video about this game. I think I first saw this game in one of Jacob Agard's books. Positional play, I think. Like a model Catalan game where black goes for this knight c6, knight b4 plan, getting the two bishops, but I can't stress enough how these positions revolve around whether black gets c5 in. And in this game, Kramnik was able to prevent that whole operation. I think bishop takes g2 was the better move. A perfect game. Practically perfect game by Kramnik. Interesting. Okay, so that was the model game I was trying to follow, but I didn't remember the move order. Yeah, I played knight bd2 first. I also remember some old game by, oh, who is that author? By a Soviet GM and author. He's written some really interesting books about his training and dealings with other top-level Soviet players of his era. He's probably also in the database. Sasonko. Yeah. I remember a game or two by Sasonko in this line where he didn't get anything with white. And I was kind of afraid I was falling into that. Yeah, knight b3. So here's the difference. So after rook c8, and it looks like black can even play c5 right away. Interesting. c5 take and then rook c8. But after rook c8, if I had played a3 here, hoping for a bishop retreat and then b4, clamping the c5 square, one really straightforward way for black to play is to take on d2. And then on knight takes d2, trying to keep control over c5. The trade, c5, pawn takes. White temporarily goes up a pawn, but then queen d5 check. And black regains the pawn with an advantage. White scrambling here to try to keep this level. So yeah, that's why bishop takes d2 and letting this bishop linger on b4, not kicking it with a3, is working out in black's favor. So I kind of felt like I had to play knight b3 to prevent bishop takes d2 and just put another piece on the c5 square. But yep, bishop e4. Even here, c5 is still playable. Yeah, and here especially c5. Okay, and I think I mentioned this in the game, but I was looking at a3 in response to that. c4, take on b4. Oh, bishop d3. That crossed my mind, but oh, you know what I missed? I missed that they can take because they're on my bishop as well. Actually, that probably wouldn't even matter that they're on my bishop. I think I just missed or underestimated this in-between move. I saw bishop d3 with the skewer, but I thought, oh, they can't do that because once I move the queen, if they take b3, then I'll take the bishop. But yeah, bishop takes f1 is a big problem. And I could just be down an exchange here. Ooh, yeah, so this whole idea now was pretty half-baked by me. Kind of hoping that on c5a3 things would work out. And honestly, it kind of felt that way too. I was just sort of playing a little hope chess here and getting lower on the clock. So yeah, c5, playable, still playable. And look, I can't even take that pawn. Is bishop, yeah, bishop d3 is just going to be the answer. Once again, I can't play rook d1 because I win their queen, but I lose a rook in the process. That's not going to cut it. Same thing on knight takes c5. They first insert bishop takes c5 and then bishop d3. Same skewer problem. Yeah, so that's the message here. If you play this line for black, this Catalan variation with a6 and b5, you got to be looking for c5 constantly, because I dodged c5 on multiple occasions here. Like, this is the first moment where c5 is playable for black. And then after rook c8, knight b3, it's still playable. So a second time, still playable here, especially good here. I get in rook c1, which helps with the whole skewer stuff. But now black's passed up 3 other opportunities to play c5. I think for all intents and purposes, even if it says queen a8 is playable, I think they got to play this move now. You got to do it, because they've got enough defenders. They don't want that rook stuck babysitting that pawn. This is basically forced at this point. Oh, and note here too, I can't play a3 because there's queen takes b3 at a minimum. Yeah, so this would have just led to some exchanges, and looks like a quality in this case. I'm a little bit better positioned than like if c5 had come a couple moves ago. All right, so yeah, that's the takeaway from the opening, and it's similar to what I felt. Black just didn't they just missed the boat in playing c5. So I get in knight c5. And let's see, did black ever have chances here? I mean, even bishop takes c5, you hate to play that move, but it's just nasty otherwise. So let's go through this kind of fast. I saw queen a6, I had stuff like bishop f1 if needed. Takes the burden off my queen from defending multiple points. Black's threatening c6 here too, so I need to address that. They played rook b8, I just traded, rook c1. Yeah, h3. I was kind of hesitant whether I need that move, but seems like it's okay. It really likes knight g5 here. That crossed my mind, but I stopped calculating after takes, seeing that king takes runs into stuff like knight f4. But the engine says you can go for it, John. You can just go for it here with queen h7 and queen takes f7. Okay, yeah, I'm probably not going to calculate that in the moment. But evidently, knight g5 was really good. Also likes bishop f1, interestingly. Maybe to prepare knight g5. But okay, I go for the trade. Black defends the h5 pawn. Queen c4 is okay. Also says I can try to activate the knight. Yeah, e4 might have been a little rushed. Wasn't quite sure about that. But at this point, I'm below 2 minutes. It says, go ahead and trade knights. Offer a trade of knights, like slightly fracture your structure. But up a pawn, major pieces on board. Black's queenside structure is still fractured. This does look very difficult to defend for black. I thought e4 was kind of forcing as well. And I was mentioning this line. I think I would have played for this trade. But black can play rook takes b4. And both these points are hanging. And c7 is hanging, but maybe it's not as stable as I would like. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's probably what I would have done against knight f6. The computer does say this is better. Queen takes c7. Knight takes e4. I was looking at this in my head. That is a better way of playing. But I don't think I would have gone for that. I think I would have tried to simplify. I don't know why rook takes b4 didn't come to mind in this line, but didn't have much time. Okay, so this all tracks. Yeah, and here my original intention was to play rook c6. And in hindsight, I wish I would have done that because it virtually forces rook b6. I wish I would have just played this endgame. Like, yeah, I repair black's queenside structure, but I get the rooks off the board. Black's knight is temporarily deactivated. I can bring my king to the center. I've got this extra d-pawn. This is probably just a technical win. And the computer seems to agree. So I try to get cute here, rook a4, and wow, it really dislikes that move. Gives me two question marks. Thought driving the knight to the back rank and getting this past a pawn would be worth it, but I think I Uno reversed myself because black's actually ready to reactivate this knight pretty quickly. Whereas my knight is actually the one that looks to be lagging here. Yeah, rook a7. And now I was really losing the plot. This was a pure, time pressure rearing its head type of decision. Not my best move there, rook a7. Inviting knight c6. And I felt it was best to try to do this. Knight e3. Yeah, black has other ways to play too here, like this, and knight e5 going for knight f3. Okay, it actually approves of the way black plays, or played in the game. Black's still down a pawn at this point, but they're far more active. Rook a3, yeah. Says black's doing fine. Maybe knight e2, not the most accurate. Says black should play either rook a2, or it also gives a line like this, where we're kind of just bouncing back and forth. Knight d3, yeah, maybe similar, trying to go after the f2 pawn or threatening knight c5. Yeah, basically if they can coordinate their rook and their knight such that they're bothering me on f2, the weak link in my chain on the king side, and also there's threats against my a pawn, that's the best way for black to handle this position. Because I have very little to attack here. I mean, black's f7 is the weak link in their chain. Both these structures are strong. But I'm sort of burdened with having to keep an eye on both wings, where black has the optionality to attack on either of the wings. They can keep me guessing. So, yeah, this is consistent with how I was feeling in the game. I felt like black had enough activity to hold here. But they got sloppy. I mean, this would have been, around here, a good time for black to invest a little more time on their clock. I mean, they're up 3 minutes. And I think if they had just calculated a little bit deeper, they would have found a pretty clean way to draw this. Or win my a pawn and just get it to equal material. Like, yeah, look at this. Knight c5. So if black had played knight b3 here, yeah, there's even ways I can go wrong. I don't recall if I even talked about this in game or right after the game, but knight b3 is pretty simple, attacks the pawn. Knight c4 would be a really good way to lose the game for me, thinking I'm doing something useful here, attacking the rook and guarding a5, because it runs into knight d2 double check and then scoop the knight. And sayonara John in this game. So if I want to keep the a pawn, I got to push, but then knight back to c5, and that a pawn is toast anyways. And again, look at how the rook being aligned with my king on the third rank is useful for black. It hinders me in playing knight c4. So yeah, that was one moment right there. Black very quickly played rook a2. They virtually played that move on the increment. And that's a mistake. Knight b3 was clean there, winning the pawn. So kudos to you if you spotted that knight b3 in the game. Yeah, and now to my credit, I activated my knight. I was like, I can't miss this chance when my knight is no longer pinned. Yeah, and then I make a mistake. So knight d6 is better here. Boy, this was a tough call, though. I mean, I knew at this point, having played knight c4, that not only was I helping the a pawn, but maybe I'd have a chance to go after the f pawn. But I'm just shooting from the hip here in time pressure. So rook d7. Yeah, I thought in the game black should play knight takes f2, but maybe that does actually lose. Uh-huh. Yeah, because if they trade, they're so far away from the a pawn. Can they stop it if we just get into some race like this? Probably they can stop it, but then my king's going to hunt them down, huh? Something like this, and this looks winning. Trickier than the game for sure, but probably winning because their knight is tied down. And what about like this? I think I mentioned knight b2 here. That wins a piece, but this could be a mildly difficult situation to win. I'm not even sure this is winning. 3 versus 2, but black structure is hard to penetrate. But actually the simplest way to win in this case is very similar to the game. Trade the knights and then get behind the a pawn. And you can see the engine even here thinks white is winning without the f pawn. That's how strong it is to have this rook positioned behind the pawn, because it forces black to deactivate their rook. Like so. And then I can start bringing the king over. And I'm going to win this rook eventually. Again, if black's king was able to prevent my king from infiltrating, that's a much closer scenario. Check out the Alekhine Capablanca game. I'll link this along with the Kramnik Carlsen game in the comments if you want to see the technique there, where the black king or the defensive side's king is actually involved in trying to prevent white from running up towards the rook. But even there, it's usually lost for the side down the pawn. Okay, so rook d7, the best move is knight b4. I mean, that is a tougher move at this point, so I can see why black didn't play it. But yeah, I mean, I think you can't trade knights, because we saw what happened in the game. This is just too easy for white. And rook a3, if that move is not natural for you, I would highly recommend beginning to work on your endgame theory, especially if you're a post-beginner player, because this move should be automatic for anyone in this position. Get behind that pawn. Do not push. If you push and you allow black to get behind the pawn, well, this is a lot tougher. I know the engine still says that white is winning here, but the mere fact that you can't push this pawn further because the rook is only defending from the side and not escorting the pawn up the board is going to make this harder. Black's going to try to attack. Probably white has to work their king over somehow and attack this black rook eventually. But that might entail weakening their king side. So we're not going to miss the moment to put the rook behind the pawn, which guarantees that black's going to have to bring their rook back to a7 or a8 to stop this pawn. And you guys saw what happened here. I could also push, but I thought, okay, I'm happy with the progress I've made with this a pawn. Let's bring up my king. Yeah, rook a4. Again, probably not necessary. I think I could just do this, but I just wanted to rule out some scenario where, I mean, it's really unlikely, but something where, like their king being up here, maybe helping h4 or somehow getting towards the back of my pawns could be annoying. Although that doesn't appear to work. Yeah, so cut off the king. I think if I were playing black, I would have tried f6. Oh, never mind. Well, I might have tried it, but I might have got mated in one. That's funny. I thought f6 was the way to at least try to conjure up some counterplay, get g5 in and start pushing the pawns, but actually runs into checkmate. Kudos if you saw that in the game too, because I did mention that I thought black had to try f6. Yeah, and now king b7. Anything else I wanted to mention here? Not really. I think this is all pretty straightforward. Yeah, king b7 and promotion coming. Okay, well, I'm glad we got a pretty rich game in for this particular standard video. Again, Catalan Opening, very strategic line. There are entire repertoires around playing g3 and bishop g2 in the d-pawn openings, getting that bishop on the long diagonal. I wouldn't encourage someone who's a beginner or even an intermediate, especially lower intermediate type player, to play this opening for white. It's too nuanced. If you're, 1800 plus, like that category, I think you can consider it. But you can see there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here, but you should really be aware of the move orders, the concrete theory, and some of these model games too, because I was even aware of this Kramnik Carlsen game, and I still messed this up. And in failing to play a3 right here, that gave black multiple opportunities to solve all their problems and more by getting in c5, which black just didn't do. Okay, pretty interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Thanks as always for watching, and thanks to the analysis gang in particular. Those of you who stick around and watch the analysis. Drop a comment if you do, if you don't mind. I'd love to hear from you. And drop a comment too if you have any questions, of course, as well. We covered a lot of ground here. Talked about some model games, that Kramnik Carlsen game, later in the end game, that Alekhine versus Capablanca, extra rook pawn for one side. I gave you guys this book recommendation if you're into the metagame of chess, Psychology in Chess by GM Nikolai Krogius, well-known grandmaster trainer from decades past. He helped Boris Spassky prepare for his match with Fischer in 1972. So he was a known top dog of Soviet chess pedagogy in the Soviet chess school. All right, I'm going to sign out here. Thanks, guys, as always. Hope you enjoyed this game. Thanks to my opponent, Jesse, as well. I'll see you guys again soon.